we've had a great conversation. There's been little nuggets here, there, and everywhere. And Peter said, "What about the followers?" But
Mhm.
right at the start, you quoted Drucker and saying,
Mhm.
"Well, the role of a leader is to create leaders."
Mhm.
Well, maybe that's what we should be doing with followers.
Oh.
And well, if you think
Mhm.
about it, one of the things that we are noticing is, I would call it a drift at the moment, but it's an accelerating drift away from extrinsic motivation, let's pay you to perform,
Mhm.
to intrinsic motivation. And the
Mhm.
last three, well, actually, we've been approached by 4 clients, and 3 of them have taken on the challenge of developing intrinsic motivation. The fourth one, when we described it to them, they said no, thank you, and gone away.
Yeah. Well, I would say leadership is a voluntary behavior.
Mm.
And the idea was, Drucker might have said, the role of leadership is to create more leaders. Actually, I think it's to facilitate more people becoming leaders if they want to,
Yes.
because it's not something that can ever be imposed upon anybody, I don't think.
Yeah. But the idea of intrinsic motivation has been around for so long. I mean, you look
Mm.
at it, it's fairly straightforward. We think there's an issue with this, with the relatedness. We can talk
Mm.
about that another time, about autonomy, having the freedom to do something without somebody standing over you all the time.
Mm.
Mastery, to know that you've got the capability to do the job. And we would add another element, the thing that we've spoken about, having a sense of purpose. Why are
Yes.
we here?
Mm. Well, and I think autonomy also, it needs to include the ability to say no thanks.
Yes. Yeah.
Actually, and in one of the most difficult concepts for me when I was thinking about leadership initially, but was actually, you don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to wake up and think, right, I'm a leader now. I'm going to exhibit all these leadership behaviors 24/7.
Yeah.
Well, good luck with that, anybody, because that just isn't going to happen. And this idea of being a follower sometimes, allowing and facilitating and nudging somebody else to be the leader is just as much, of course, just as
Yeah.
much a part of leadership. And maybe that's about how we help develop more leaders, how we help people reveal to themselves that intrinsic motivation that they may well have been suppressing, whether it's for cultural reasons or it's for team reasons, whatever it is, because it's back to the Johari Windows thing. We don't know what we don't know about ourselves, and situations can bring out remarkable leadership competencies in people.
Yeah. I was privileged in the 70s and 80s to have frequent contact and do some work with John Adair.
Mm.
And John Adair brought some interesting thinking to leadership, because until then it was about the leader doing things to people, and it all came from the leader. And Adair changed our perspective. He said, no, it's about addressing needs, the
Mm.
needs of the individual, the team, and a task. And so he kind of said, no, there's another way of looking at that.
Mm.
And I think we are beginning to see the individual needs beginning to acquire some greater importance. If I go back to when I started work, or when I went to university in the mid 60s, only 4% of the population went to university. And funnily enough, of that 4%, less than a tenth were female.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, when I went to Hull University, if you could find a female on the campus, it was like spotting a you know, an endangered species.
Mm.
So, but now we have more than 50% of the
Mm.
population with a university education. We've got 70% with a university and a college education.
Mm.
Um, it's pretty much 50-50 when it comes to males and females. That world has changed, and the needs of those people are different. It,
They are, and not only that, and rightly, I think the demands of those generations have changed because
yes,
I have to say I was not in a position in my generation like you to be able to say I don't like the way this system works. I think we wanted some other
yeah,
way. So nowadays, of course, we have a critical mass of people who are able to say, actually, we don't want this. We want something else. And
yeah,
that critical mass is irresistible. And this comes right back to the earlier part of our conversation. The change has happened already. The change
Yeah.
in attitudes and expectations and approaches of employees as a generation coming through, whether we talk about Gen Z or Gen Alpha or indeed Gen X, millennials as well. The change happened 10, 15 years ago or whatever. And actually, we do need to catch up with that now
Yeah.
and allow ourselves to be vulnerable enough as leadership figures to say, all right, then, I admit, just once I'll admit quietly, I don't know everything and I'm not really in control of absolutely everything. So help me out here.
So, sort of final question from me, and this is looping all the way back to something we spoke about right at the beginning. This requires curiosity. And what I'm beginning to see is the idea of curiosity, which is a term I'd never heard of until about 10 years ago, beginning to bubble through and beginning to feature in the world of leadership. And you are really expressing the need for curiosity. You can't sort of sit there and look at the world around you and not wonder what's going on. You need that curiosity.
Yeah.
And as you know, the World Economic Forum produces a list of the 10 most important skills for the 21st century. And up there in the top 5 is curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah,
How
absolutely.
important is this?
It's absolutely crucial. And if there was another T-shirt that I could get everybody to wear, it would have on it, what if?
Yeah.
What if? What does this button do? What happens if I push this button? What happens if I give these people the power to manage their own work? Shock horror. What happens if I empower the teams that I have and stand back and let them make mistakes? Because I think, and I think the curiosity needs to be almost not just a trained, a developed competency within leadership. Because it's not just enough to say, oh, well, what if? It's not really enough to say that. We need to push it much further. And there's a question I quite often say to people when they say, "Oh, what should I do if I'm in? If I'm really struggling, if I don't know what to do?" So my response is always, ask yourself, what would I do if I was not afraid? And that's the curiosity that leadership figures need to adopt. What would I do here if I was not afraid?
Yeah.
Because that allows them to be vulnerable.
I'm going to ask Peter to contribute now. We've been doing the lovely thing that we do with the mental toughness concept, and that people like Peter and John and others in the academic world, is it really pushes back boundaries. And there's been a piece of research recently on the relationship between mental toughness and curiosity. And the study showed there's a 0.5 correlation. It's a massive correlation between mental toughness and curiosity. But it's not a positive correlation across all the factors. One of the factors is actually negatively correlated, and that's achievement orientation. And that's really, really interesting, because achievement orientation, getting the job done, is one of the things we value most in leaders. And here we're saying, actually, there's a chance that this works against curiosity. Peter, please explain this.
Well, it's not particularly straightforward, but achievement orientation is linked to status. It's linked to being objectively successful, and I think the underpinning mindset under there is two thoughts: what if this goes wrong? And what we try and put in there is what if this goes right? But it's more protection in a protectionist approach. If you're interested in achievement orientation, it's how you define achievement. So if you define achievement that you've developed yourself, that's something else. If you find achievement that you've met a target, that's another thing entirely. So curiosity does make you vulnerable, because you have to admit that you don't know what you don't know. You have to admit you're not perfection. You have to admit that you haven't got all the answers. We're back to that idea, I don't know what I'm doing. So achievement orientation is one of the more tangible elements of the 8 factors. So I think that's why, and curiosity is the one which might bring the whole pack of cards tumbling down. You might suddenly discover that actually you always wanted to be a canoeist. Chief executive, no, thank you. I'm off to do something else. So it's that. It seems like the most trivial factor. It's not trivial in any way, but it's actually a fundamental part of people's makeup. But you have to be able to fail to succeed if you're going to succeed. And achievement orientation, it feels uncomfortable. That it's that element of feelings of anxiety. So I think that's what's going on. All the rest is linked positively. Achievement orientation is about it's the most objective, I think, of the 8 factors, and curiosity is the most subjective of what we're talking about. So put subjectivity and objectivity together, you get a bit of a warm front meeting a cold front. I think that's what's happening.
I think also, if I could reinforce that, if I can, the idea of achievement being a personal thing from a leadership perspective. Most of the leadership figures I've met would be quite comfortable adopting the credit for an achievement. And which means, of course, that if curiosity requires us to become a bit vulnerable, maybe even to share or relinquish some of the credit for an achievement, it's maybe about partly about ownership of the success of the achievement. That might be something of it as well. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I'm going to keep a T-shirt printed in business because I'll take I don't know what I'm doing. Second line, but I'm going to do it anyhow. Third line, and I'd like a bit of support and help. So, and it brings it all together. That it's the idea that it can go wrong, and more mentally tough people can cope with it going wrong. They don't take it personally, but they learn from it because, and as you get older, you get more used to that. I can see with younger people, they're seen as softer. They're not. It's just that it's really damaging. They haven't had the bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I often, when I'm trying to mentor people, I can start off great mistakes I have made. You think that's bad? What about this one? We won't go into that but and it was really sleepless night stuff when I was 18.
Well, I used to do lots and lots of guest lecturing at one time. I don't do quite so much now, but I the most popular session I ever used to do was ways in which I've got it wrong, mistakes that I have made, and it was great because you actually, of course, exactly as you say, actually, Peter, once you get used to the fact that this stuff happens and sometimes it's going to happen, you can have fun actually looking at it objectively. And when you share it with people, it's a delight for them to hear that somebody actually got something catastrophically wrong in ways that they might not even have imagined. And that actually, I think, helps them to realize that this stuff will happen. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think this is also reflecting that shift that we've spoken about from the way that people saw things in the 60s to the way we see things now. Certainly in the 60s and 70s, leadership was centered on the leader. The leader was the fount of all knowledge. The leader was the driver. The leader got things done. And achievement orientation acquired a significance. However, things moved too quickly. I mean, what we're seeing now is the growth of partnership working. Things move so quickly. You don't have time. I mean, at one stage, I worked with a client and we worked on a 5-year project to change the culture in the organization. Nobody would give you 5 years now. If you got
That's
5
a career.
months, you'd be doing well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can do it if you tap into all the knowledge and expertise that lies around you. We didn't do that in the past. We were the experts. Now, the expertise lies all around us. And if we're not curious, we won't find it.
That's where the wisdom is. Absolutely right.
Now, John, I think I don't know what we've done to our audience.
I think we've put the world to rights and then deconstructed it again, I think. probably.
We've just told him it's very complex and incredibly difficult to solve, and go and get a box of tissues. So
Yeah, and have fun with it.
Yeah.
It's a positive challenge. It's
Yeah.
not easy, but it's enjoyable to give it a go.
Yep.
and it is doable. It is doable. We meet enough people who do it, and we need to learn from them. So, John, it's been brilliant speaking with you, and it's been a hugely enjoyable discussion. As we said right at the beginning, when we started, we didn't know where the conversation would go, and it's gone to some interesting places.
Well,
We didn't even know where places. So
no, that's right. I've enjoyed the conversation immensely, actually, Doug, and huge thanks to you and to Peter for such an enlightenment, actually, as I've had this morning, because I've learned far more from this morning than I think I've probably learned the last 10 years of my job, actually. So thank you very much. It's been great talking to you, really.
Brilliant. And I'm off to find some roundabouts.
Yes.